Hey, welcome to the Marketing Stack podcast. And in this episode, I'm talking to Nelson, who's actually a guru. He's definitely one of the people that I look up to in terms of marketing and just having more intention in terms of how he says things, how he works, how he does things, how he just interacts with me on the podcast. And I think you're going to enjoy the episode as well because we cover quite a lot about intention. We cover quite a lot of marketing trends and things that are going on right now in the industry. So, with that being said, enjoy the episode. Nelson, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. The podcast is going well. I've had some very interesting people, and I think you're going to bring a lot of value to the audience as well. Just to introduce you quickly, so you've been working with e-commerce businesses and SaaS businesses on content strategy, conversion copywriting, digital marketing, and a whole host of other things. And now you started the podcast for working from home, or called Working from Home podcast. I'm excited to get into the episode and actually jump into a little bit of your story, what you've seen gone on over the last year or so, and just get to know you a little bit and hopefully provide some value to the audience.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Let's do it.
so Nelson, thank you so much again. And so give us a little bit of a backstory. Tell us where you started, how you actually got into the work that you're doing and the value that you're giving to your clients. And then we'll talk about COVID, obviously, because it's topical and it's challenging and it's a whole host of other things.
Sure. So I suppose my story starts kind of 10, 11 years ago. I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but just essentially I've been involved in digital marketing and some guise or other for 10, 11 years now. I've got a master's in marketing, after which I went to work for Hitachi as kind of an in-house marketer. And after just under a year, I left there to move to Birmingham to become part of a digital marketing and PR agency. I got my start within paid and organic social, which was just kicking off at that time, really starting to get big. Then I moved into PPC and SEO and finally conversion rate optimization. These days, actually, as you said rightly, that I'm more involved in content strategy, content creation, and conversion copywriting, really, for SaaS and ecom businesses. But when I first started freelancing, which was a few years ago now, 3 or 4 years, I think, I was actually kind of just working on the paid social side. So I worked mainly with ecom businesses, managing paid spends between, well, up to kind of 150 or 200,000 a month, mainly on Facebook and Instagram. Had a great time doing it. But eventually I kind of found like my passion for the actual execution and the tactical side was slightly waning. That kind of brings us to COVID, right? So in about, I think, April or May 2020, my biggest client at the time, because I was running it very much as a freelancer rather than an agency, my biggest client fired me, which was bad at the time for a couple of days, but actually was fine and actually really needed to happen. I wasn't enjoying working with the client. They had some really tough times with COVID because they were an events-based business. So you can imagine how badly they were hit. And they were just letting go of kind of everybody that they could to do the right thing, basically, to stay afloat. I hated working for them, absolutely hated it. But the money that I got from it was great. My wife and I were living in Valencia in Spain at the time. I had to work very, very few hours. So, I could make a decent salary, for Spain while working between 1 and 2 hours a day, basically, and still make a good enough salary, not to save anything, but, to live the lifestyle, to enjoy the tapas, to kind of live that outdoor life that the Spanish love. So it served its purpose, but it was really kind of almost like a kick when this news kind of came in. But I'm so glad it did, because it kind of forced me to reevaluate what I was enjoying and what I wasn't. And was really enjoying the lifestyle, but I wasn't enjoying the work I was doing at all. So I made the decision that I was going to get a few clients on to replace that. And luckily, and it was just luck, I managed to replace kind of 2/3 of that income within about 3 days. It was just somebody reaching out through my website. So that's why SEO is important, guys. So I managed to replace that income, which definitely took the pressure off. And I made the decision that actually, when I was going to build this back up, I was going to do so in the form of a small agency that actually didn't involve me much in the day-to-day. So we've got kind of 2 freelancers that I work with, and kind of like additional people that we bring in for design and stuff like that as well. But actually, we've got 3 or 4 clients now, and I do probably an hour a month on each of those clients. So I probably work 3 or 4 hours on the kind of agency business, which is called the E-commerce Profits, if anybody's interested. And that's just e-com only, Facebook and Instagram, just paid ads basically. But that's a great business because it pays me the equivalent of a salary, and I only have to work 3 or 4 kind of hours a month on those, which is great. And that really has freed me up massively to concentrate on the stuff that I actually really like doing. So I kind of looked back on my journey when I was kind of had this moment where I was like, right, well, if I don't enjoy this, what am I actually going to do? And the one thing that I found that was consistent throughout my journey was content. So whether it was when I was involved in SEO or when I was involved in social, content was just something that was just there, throughout the whole thing. And I really enjoyed doing it. I had a lot of experience in keyword research. I had a lot of case studies and things that I could point to, like people like Pyrex. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Yeah. I worked with them. And the work that I did was responsible for more than a 50% increase in organic search, which was great for an already established brand. So I had all of these case studies, that I could point to, and kind of things that were just kind of giving me the inkling, hang on, I can do this, and I can do this on a high level. And what I found is that because I've been the person who has actually been implementing these marketing campaigns for e-commerce businesses, for SaaS businesses, I could almost leapfrog a lot of the other people doing it and, almost cut out the first year or 2 of freelancing in that particular genre or industry. And jump straight to commanding quite decent prices. And obviously I've increased, but actually I was able to skip a lot of those steps because, would you rather hire a content strategist and a writer who only knows about this stuff through research, or would you hire one who has ran these campaigns themselves, that has owned their own e-commerce business and sold their own e-commerce business as I have? And the answer is like a pretty resounding, well, we'll hire the person who's actually done that and is basically just writing about what they've done versus, has to approach it like a writer. Like I approach it as kind of a tactician, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of practical application and selling a skill once you've got some experience. You don't necessarily need a whole lot of experience. Because they, I think clients understand that there's a form of experimentation, especially clients who have, a more mature business or going into that maturity, where they understand that marketing is all about not throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what works, but educating yourself and calculating or using best cases from data that's available, that's accessible online. And you unpacked so many things there, but I want to focus on sort of, in my mind, there's 2 camps when it comes to marketing. It's the guys who are organic and the guys who are paid. And you've got experience on both ends. So maybe talk a little bit about that feeling, because you've spoken about the advantage of it from a client point of view. So, in positioning yourself and saying, well, you've got experience on both sides, you know what works on both sides. But how does that feel, like, because this is a passionate industry, right? The guys who are in either one camp or the other, it's kind of Apple versus Samsung, right? Or Android versus Apple. It's and you've crossed both sides. So tell me a little bit more about how that happened and sort of what you see in the industry today with regards to that.
Sure. So I'm going to push back a little bit. I think it depends totally on where you are, whether you think there are like these two distinct camps, like paid versus organic. That's much of a muchness for me. On a tactical level, you're probably going to be doing one or the other as the bulk of your job. And then you kind of get into this thing of like, okay, well, you only see the benefits of what you do and you don't see the downsides and you don't see the benefits of the other one. Actually, it very much depends on what your goals are and what kind of timeline you're thinking on. As you need to kind of start with the goals in mind and almost map backwards. And I know very, very few businesses that succeed at the top level, the sort of scale of businesses that I'm thinking of in my head that don't combine both of them really, really well. So let's take a couple of examples just to make it concrete. So if you're a SaaS business and you're VC funded, and you've been given some incredibly ambitious growth targets to meet, and you need to, 4x your growth in 6 months, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of organic work. Like you might still be creating content, but the content that you do create is going to be used elsewhere in the funnel. It's going to be used in your paid campaigns, or it's going to be used in the back-end campaigns in email and things like that, as upsells and ways to grab people and pull them into demos and things like that. 100%. So you're not going to be fussed about organic when you're thinking on a 6-month timeline. The bulk of your spend is going to be on paid, probably performance marketing. It's going to be on your PPC. It's going to be on your social. That's just the lay of the land, right? Versus if you're still kind of a startup in the SaaS space, but you're bootstrapped, I think you're going to be more likely to want to kind of make that balance a little bit kind of more even. You're still going to want to have an element of paid marketing in order to bring users in, because the more users that you have, the quicker that you can test, the quicker that you can get feedback, and that feedback can be brought back in to then improve the product. So you need an element of that coming in, or referrals or partnerships with other businesses that kind of talk to your key audience and have that connection with them. But you're likely to do more of the organic stuff, right? And the reason for this, and the reason why content is so important to SaaS businesses, is because anybody who has run paid campaigns for SaaS businesses knows how crazy expensive they are, especially something like paid search. Like for some of these terms, you could be talking $15, $25 per click. So because the products are so expensive, the customer lifetime value is a lot higher than kind of a one-off purchase through like an e-commerce business, for example. If I sign up to, something like Ahrefs, which is the keyword research tool that I use, it's like $99 or $120 a month. So if they get me as a customer, they're going to make well over $1,000 from me in a year, versus an e-commerce business that wants to sell me a t-shirt, is the t-shirt probably costs $20, $30. And actually the margin on that is quite small, because then you have to factor in logistics and delivery and that sort of thing. So it's very much working backwards from those goals, reverse engineering what needs to happen, and also thinking about the internal and external pressures from things like stakeholders, what else is going on in your business, to kind of determine what's the right mix for you. it's never really in my eyes, okay, we'll just do paid or we'll just do organic. You're missing a lot of opportunity there if you approach things in that way.
Yeah, most definitely. And, with campaigns that I've run both on Facebook and Google, there's always an uptick in organic while the paid campaigns are running, because people sometimes screenshot, the ad on Facebook, they make a note of the link, and then they come to the site organically, either directly or they're searching in it and using the link on a Google search. So that does happen, but there's also a third leg, and it's customer referrals. So you mentioned sort of customer lifetime value, and how long people are clients of yours, or how long their stay as clients or as customers. And so that's the piece also that I think a lot of companies miss, is from a marketing point of view, when you're paying $50, $100, $200 to get somebody into your funnel and become a customer, you want those people to rave about you, share the experience with other people in their network or friends or whoever, so that kind of pays for itself. Then your lifetime customer value goes up for each customer, and then your cost per click or your cost per acquisition actually reduces. And a lot of people are not thinking that far into the future. And I guess, like, from an SEO point of view, obviously you spoke about the long game, and it takes longer to rank and all of these things. It's a lot more effort over time. But talk about that. So, in a world where we're sort of surrounded by apps where everything is short attention span, we've got 3 seconds to make an impression, 7 times that we have to hit somebody before they actually decide to do anything with us. TikTok videos are like super short, and they're just people going mindlessly through the feed. And then here we've got this long-term strategy where if you really want to grow a brand, you've got to think long-term. And that's, talk to him about, from a copywriting and a conversion point of view, how do you handle that and how do you approach it?
So I think actually this myth about short attention spans is that, it's not true. It is a myth. What actually happens is people have short consideration spans, which means that you only have a few seconds to actually impress somebody or intrigue them or pique their interest to get them to continue to pay attention to you. Actually, what you'll find is people have massive attention spans. That's why people listen to hour-long, 2-hour-long Joe Rogan podcasts, right? Like, don't try and tell him that people only have like this 6-7 second, goldfish attention span. It's just not the case. It's why we binge on Netflix and things like that for several hours after we should have stopped watching. So I feel like thinking like that almost gives yourself an excuse and an out to almost say, well, it's just the customers, it's just the consumers, they don't have this attention span. I think they don't have an attention span for perhaps the products that person is selling. So that's the first thing that I want to get out the way. It's one of the things that I think that has saved me less pain since kind of going into content strategy, and it's because of previous pain of working with those clients, is I very rarely take on clients who haven't already had some experience of content, have put together kind of a strategy themselves, have worked with writers before, have had experience of managing those teams or at least seeing what those teams have done, because it's a big kind of upfront investment for those people, because you need to put the process in place, you need to do the keyword research, you need to actually create all of the different content assets, whether they be blogs or white papers or podcasts or videos or tweets or whatever that looks like. It is a big investment. It's not the same as back in the day. I when I was kind of in charge of PPC for the agency, all I would do is I could have a campaign up and running in the next hour. I pick the keywords very, very quickly, and then write a couple of ads and then get things running, and that it'll be serving by the end of the day. content strategy does not work like that.
Right.
It's very much like let's get in it for the long term. Let's kind of create this content to position ourselves as either the thought leaders, or let's pick a particular angle to that we can be thought of within the market, particular positioning and stuff like that. So what you tend to see is that when I work with most companies, they've either got kind of a low or a medium domain authority. So I don't want to get stuck into talking about content strategy just in terms of content that ranks, but a lot of people are familiar with kind of SEO. So it's an easier example. Actually, content is a lot more than that, but we can touch on that in a minute, perhaps. But for that sort of content, actually, it's about kind of mapping out which parts of the funnel you need to create content for, based on the customer journey. And there's a lot of understanding that even goes into that before you even start writing content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Does that go some way into answering the question?
Oh yeah, you went deep. I mean, like, to go just take a step back in terms of attention span, I really like what you said there, because I think a lot of marketers, maybe bad marketers or not so good marketers, have used that as an excuse to their clients to say, oh, it's the client's fault, not looking at the content, not looking at the structure of the content, not looking at, oh, we actually didn't plan the content to match that audience to grab their attention. And I think a lot of companies like Netflix are winning at that game because they know their audience really, really well. And they're looking at, which thumbnails are getting clicked on, which episodes, which types of, and putting in the feed in front of you, the appropriate stuff for you. It's all recommended. And, there's this huge debate about personalization and privacy and us being tracked online. But there's no doubt that the AI, whether it's Google or Facebook, which are the two biggest ones, are definitely serving us content that's relevant. They wouldn't be huge companies if they didn't. And so, it's kind of, and we're kind of going into like the privacy territory right now, but from a content point of view, like, how else would it be done? Mm-hmm. Because if we're not getting the content we enjoy, then kind of what are we gonna watch? Like, how are we gonna consume stuff? And there probably is another way, and in the future there something may come up. But it works for now, and it's proven that it's functional, even on the advertising side.
Sure. So what do you? First thing I want to say is that for most companies, you really shouldn't be thinking about personalization yet. Most companies that I come across, and I'm not talking kind of like mom and dad or mom and pop or whatever the American kind of call it, stores. I'm not talking about people that are doing a couple 100,000 or even like low millions. I'm talking about people that are doing hundreds of millions a year in revenue. Like, even these companies are missing out so much of the low hanging fruit. You wouldn't believe kind of the amount of, when I'm doing competitor research, for example, and looking at the kind of keyword strategies that they're using, you wouldn't believe how many like large companies just don't really have a strategy, which sounds bizarre. But, they might have kind of got big through performance marketing, for example, and relied on kind of one main channel and never really considered this. Like, they've written blog posts that rank, but not for like the right keyword terms. They don't like rank for any kind of high customer intent sorts of keywords. So I think kind of to personalize or to not personalize is an argument that far fewer people, or a debate that far fewer people need to be having, because there are so many things that you're just not doing that will have a much, much bigger impact typically. Of course, for this sort of thing, I have to talk, I have to pick the median, I have to pick kind of the average case, and the average, there's so much more that you could be doing before you even get into that. Privacy is a really interesting one. Now, again, like the companies like Google, companies like Netflix have got so big because of this flywheel effect, because they've been able to see how their products have been used, how their services have been used by customers, and then they've been able to trial lots of things, whether that's manual kind of A/B tests, whether that's kind of algorithm updates, whether that's kind of machine learning, as lots of it is now. They've got some sort of feedback loop that pulls back into the product that then informs the next thing that they do. Now, I'm not sure necessarily everybody realizes this, but we all have access to those tools without even getting into the privacy debate. You can still retain an element of anonymity when you're doing this. And it can be something as simple as, okay, well, what I'm going to do is look at my pages that are ranking on my website currently, and I'm going to look at the different click-through rates that I have. And it's super simple. You just go to Google Search Console, and then you look at all the different pages and how they correspond to click-through rates. And you go, okay, why is that one doing really well? Why is that one doing really well?
Right.
Why isn't that one? Okay, let's open that one up and let's see what everybody else is writing there. Let's see what the intent is on that search engine results page. Okay, I see why it's not like that. That's still feedback. You're still using data. It's just you're using kind of anonymous mass, almost blanket data, rather than individual, this person, person X is doing action Y. The same with emails and open rates and click-through rates on paid social ads, and looking at how different angles of your social media messaging. This is all stuff that we can incorporate into our own flywheel without getting into advanced things like machine learning.
But Nelson, that stuff's not sexy.
Making money is sexy, isn't it? Do you want a business that's here in a year's time or not?
Of course. I mean, everybody wants sort of the gold part at the end of the rainbow, but this is the kind of work that you've got to get into to figure it out, because like you said, so these are the low-hanging fruits that you're talking about, just basic analysis or simple analysis. What I found in working with companies over the years is a lot of them don't actually know about Google Search Console. A lot of them don't know about the keyword planner in AdWords, which is free to do research on keywords. Even Ubersuggest or Ahrefs, they're SEO tools, but they're easy enough for just a normal person to go and put in a keyword and figure out what's a good blog post to write or what's a good headline for a page. So, it's the question I can ask you is, why do you think they're not doing it, apart from the not being sexy?
So I try and take quite a generous view of this. So when I've run my own businesses, I have several businesses now that I run consecutively. So I get it. I'm in a very different place because I have this marketing background, because it is almost my natural go-to above and beyond product, or above and beyond logistics, or above and beyond operations. I tend to go to marketing first even when I'm running my own businesses. They have a lot to do, when you're a business owner, or you're an MD, or you're a CEO, depending on the scale, you might be totally kind of absorbed in other things. If you're a startup founder that's reached scale, then maybe 80% of your job isn't actually to do with marketing, or actually the vast majority of your job isn't to do with marketing. Actually, maybe at that time, 70 or 80% of your job is actually just hiring. which sounds bizarre. Like nobody really tries to start a business, particularly a startup, that scales because they're super passionate about hiring. But actually, what you find when you talk to these people is most of their job is putting the right people in place. So you need a basic understanding of marketing, but a lot of your job is putting the right marketing people in place when we're talking
Right.
about their job within a marketing context. Of course, they've got a billion other things to do. But so I try and take quite a generous view of it. Like anybody that wants to grow their business or even just sustain their business knows how important marketing is. They might know more or less about certain channels because they've either like traditional channels that they've grown up with. Maybe it's a channel that they use personally. If they're a big Twitter user, they might see the value of community there. Whereas if they're not a Twitter user, for example, they might just be like, oh, Twitter, is that still a thing? So like our personal experience plays into it a lot. It isn't just like a data, like we're humans, we're storytelling machines. So we don't ever look at things like that rationally.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about the last year, what you've seen changes, obviously with COVID. We're in 2021 now. And so just a little bit of what's happened for you and what you've seen in the industry and where you think we're going to go over the next year, 2 years in terms of marketing.
Sure. So let's talk about e-commerce first and then SaaS after that. So e-commerce, if you don't know already, anybody that's listening has experienced like a massive growth. People are talking 5-10 years growth within 6 to 9 months, which is just insane. Yeah. And it's because we can't go out to shops. It's because we have more in general, the average person has more disposable income because they're not spending it on going out, they're not spending it on commuting, and the need is there as well. If you need something, you don't necessarily want to risk it to go out to get stuff, particularly if you're like the UK is right now, which is like stage or tier 4 quarantine. We're not supposed to be going out for anything other than, if we're a key worker or to go to a hospital or see a doctor, or to get food. So we still have needs over and above that. If you think of kind of Maslow's hierarchy, there's still lots of other things that we would want that can't be met through the normal traditional route of going out. So e-commerce has just spiked, and I think it will continue to grow. What's quite interesting there, though, is that like on Facebook in particular, and other platforms have matched. Google have done so as well, but less to the less kind of aggressively as Facebook. But what we've seen is that like cost per acquisitions have gone up through Facebook. It just costs more to get a customer, and like for e-commerce, that's bad. So you're seeing these two things happen almost in tandem. There are more people online, but more people buying from e-com, but that has increased demand, which has increased kind of competition, which has Facebook. I'm not going to pretend that this is just the result of e-commerce, because every year, pretty much without fail, you see CPAs go up on Facebook. Right. And that's something that e-commerce kind of owners have to think about right now. They have to think about, okay, well, maybe we can't just make all of our money on Facebook. Maybe we need to pay more attention to kind of email. How do we use email, for example, to turn somebody from a single purchaser to a multi-purchaser, somebody who has bought from us time and time again? And what we're finding these days is like the people that are successful know how to take somebody from Facebook, how to use Facebook as a cold traffic engine and warm them up and through retargeting and things like that. And as soon as they possibly can, get them to turn into an email subscriber. That is really where the money lies. Using it as a cold traffic engine. You can still make a lot of sales there, of course, and hopefully they'll still be profitable sales. but this journey into kind of thinking about customer lifetime value. And there's people that I'm working with right now, actually, an app provider on Shopify that are kind of solving these problems. Two guys who are ex LinkedIn data scientists, and they work for a company called Trestle. If you want to try it out, they're making this kind of calculations, this data analysis, because that stuff is hard. It's not just a case of putting it in Excel. There's real complicated data analysis that goes on behind that. I want to compare that to SaaS, which hasn't had as much of an impact in terms of the paid side that I've been able to see. Now, that's mainly, I think, because of availability bias. Actually, I'm involved in the paid side of e-commerce, and I'm involved in the content side of e-commerce and SaaS, but I'm not involved in the paid side of SaaS. So I'm not sure if like I can actually rely on my instincts or what I've seen there. I think it's just quite a small sample size.
Interesting. Well, I mean, obviously, like Shopify, Zoom, all these companies have grown exponentially because of it. And, you know, in my mind, like we were expecting Facebook to increase their prices anyway. Like it's just the natural progression of how PPC advertising works. But I think it's much higher this year or in the last few, like with one of my clients, we're running an event. So it's webinar-based ads. And the CPAs doubled over December to November, like from November to December. And so that was really like a bit of a surprise. I mean, we didn't expect it to double because obviously Christmas sales, etc. But I think we got to sort of critical mass towards the end of last year where everybody was like, oh, so events and consulting and sort of this industry is still going to carry on. And because of the situation with COVID, it's just going to be here for a little longer. So, well, let's just carry on doing what we're doing on Facebook and pivot into more online stuff because that's what we have available right now. So it has been interesting. It's been challenging too. But at the same time, like sales has been good too, even in the event or virtual space. So
I think like the one thing that I didn't mention there that probably plays into it because it's just happened is the Apple's changes with iOS 14. So for those that don't know, Apple have basically stripped out a lot of Facebook's ability to gather data on key things that they were gathering before. So that means that the Facebook kind of algorithm, I suppose, that kind of ads engine doesn't have the data that it did do. So there's no way that, like, I think that CPAs aren't going to continue to rise because it's now that Facebook have less data to make their decisions on. So actually they have to, their sample sizes have to increase. And, you know, if you don't think that's true, then just kind of ask yourself why Facebook put up such a complaint about this and have started like a big media campaign around it. Like companies don't do that unless they're worried it's going to affect their business model.
Well, I think, yeah. So there's a lot of, I guess, fear from Facebook's end because they've got a huge investment in Instagram and Facebook in terms of making this work. And in terms of the way it was working. But if you look at it from a business owner's point of view, you know, you're trying to sell sneakers or T-shirts or, you know, just sort of e-com items without any upsells, without technology like the company that you were talking about where they're trying to solve that. You just, you know, like a mom and pop shop trying to get your product out. Even if you're selling pizza, like, you know, it's the same because you can't upsell a second pizza in the same day, right? So it's a situation where now all of a sudden you have to have a bit of a budget, and Facebook is open about this on their landing page where they're talking about this issue. And they're talking about like 50% reduction in conversions, which means half of their data is unusable. and that's and it affects Google as well. But Google hasn't said much about it. I guess they're trying to figure it out.
Google are in a much better position when it comes to this change, because essentially when you're on Facebook, a lot of it is about like browser behavior. So when you're on Facebook specifically, and I know I'm well aware that it kind of affects website behavior, but it's slightly different. You're just browsing, and Facebook can see if that you're interested in something when you click on it, and then you go to this site. But like stripping out kind of third-party pixels and all of that don't need to go in there. Just the difference to be pointed out is that a lot of Google's profit, like the vast majority of Google's revenue, actually comes from the search engine use, right? So where Facebook has to guess what you're interested in, Google knows exactly what you're interested in because you've searched for it. They can literally use your search behavior, the queries that you type in. And I type in t-shirt, they go, oh, great, Nelson's really interested in a t-shirt. Whereas, on Facebook, I might click on an ad, some fashion store, and I might click through on their site and things like that. That's not anywhere near as clear a signal as, that's maybe like I'm kind of interested in clothing versus, that's kind of really top middle of the funnel behavior versus this buy t-shirts now that I've just typed in. Not that anybody types that, but you know what I mean.
And that goes back to the intent, right? Goes back to the intention that a person has based on the platform. And I use this in one of my other interviews, talking about Netflix. You're expecting to watch something longer form because it's Netflix, because you've opened that app, versus when you open TikTok, even though you don't intend being in a wormhole for 3 hours, you're watching short videos and it's short, and so you're okay with that. So Nelson, this has been amazing. Thank you. I learned some stuff too from you, so thank you very much for that. Where can people check you out? Where can they listen to your stories, your website? Give us a few places that they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find the website. It's nelson-jordan.com, or, if you're in England like I am, that's nelson-jordan.com. You can get me on Twitter. I'm WFH podcast host. And if you want to listen to the Working From Home podcast, where I interview entrepreneurs, freelancers, non-traditional workers, essentially anybody who works from home in some capacity, either because they wanted to or these days they've been forced to, just search for Working From Home podcast with Nelson Jordan, and you'll find it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen, it will be there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the episode.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you for listening to the episode or watching the episode, depending on where you're consuming this content. Would really appreciate if you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast channel. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss another episode. I'll be publishing sort of podcast episode or guest interviews on this channel fairly regularly, as often as I can. And with that being said, I really hope you enjoyed the episode, and comment below and let me know how you are going, how things are with you in terms of marketing, and just share your comments about the episode as well. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.